Throughout North America, stories surface from time to time about massive lynx prowling northern forests. Cats far larger than any documented specimen, with tufted ears and enormous paws that leave tracks the size of dinner plates in fresh snow. You hear these tales from trappers in remote cabins, from hunters who have spent decades in the backcountry, and from indigenous communities whose oral histories stretch back generations. They speak of lynx encounters that do not match what the textbooks say, animals that seem almost spectral in their ability to appear and vanish without warning. But here's the thing. According to wildlife biologists, the lynx we have in North America is well documented, thoroughly studied, and should not be capable of reaching the sizes described in these accounts. Not based on decades of research, not according to thousands of documented specimens, and not in any scientific database. When you start piecing together enough of these stories, when you look at the patterns, it becomes harder to dismiss them entirely. It got me wondering, what exactly are people encountering in those deep woods? So today I want to take a closer look at the lynx of North America, the mysteries surrounding them, and whether there is something we are missing about these elusive cats. Before we dive into the mystery, we need to understand what the lynx actually is. North America is home to the Canada lynx, which roams the boreal forest stretching from Alaska through Canada and dipping into the northern United States. This cat is built for snow. It has disproportionately large paws that work like natural snowshoes, allowing it to move across deep powder where other predators would flounder. Those oversized feet can be nearly 4 inches across, spreading wide to distribute the cat's weight. The lynx has distinctive black tufts on its ear tips, a short, stubby tail with a black tip, and a thick ruff of fur around its face that gives it an almost lion-like appearance in winter. An adult Canada lynx typically weighs between 18 and 24 pounds, though males can occasionally reach 30 pounds. They stand about 20 inches at the shoulder and measure roughly 3 feet from nose to tail. They are specialized predators, and their diet consists almost entirely of snowshoe hares. In fact, the lynx population rises and falls in sync with the hare population in a well-documented 10-year cycle. The Canada lynx is listed as threatened in the lower 48 states, where its range has contracted significantly. They are solitary, largely nocturnal, and extraordinarily elusive. But here's where things get interesting. Despite extensive research, despite thousands of lynx being trapped, studied, and documented over more than a century, there are persistent accounts of lynx that do not fit the profile. Reports describe cats weighing 50, 60, even 70 pounds. Sightings describe lynx with body lengths approaching that of a mountain lion. And perhaps most intriguing, stories from indigenous communities describe lynx populations that behave differently, that hunt differently, and that may represent something science has not fully cataloged. These are not just modern accounts. Historical records contain references to unusually large lynx going back centuries. Early fur traders in the 1700s and the 1800s occasionally noted pelts that seemed far larger than normal. One account from 1889 in the Canadian wilderness described a lynx shot by a trapper that allegedly weighed 65 pounds and measured over 4 feet long. The man kept the pelt for years, showing it to visitors who consistently expressed disbelief at its size. Another report from the early 1900s in northern Ontario told of a lynx caught in a trap that was so powerful it had managed to drag the trap chained to a log for more than 100 yards through deep snow. When the trapper finally caught up to it, he claimed the cat stood nearly as tall as his hip and had paws the size of his open hand. Now let's look at some more recent encounters. A wildlife biologist working in northern British Columbia in the 1990s was conducting a winter survey when he spotted tracks that stopped him cold. They were clearly felid, clearly from something with large padded feet, but they were enormous. Each print measured close to 5 inches across, significantly larger than any lynx track he had ever seen, and he had been studying lynx for over a decade. He followed the tracks for nearly a mile until they led him to a kill site where a deer had been taken down. Not a snowshoe hare, a full-grown deer. But lynx do not take down deer. They lack the size and strength. He set up camera traps around the area but never captured an image of whatever made those tracks. Another account comes from a hunting guide in Alaska who has spent over 40 years in the wilderness. He was leading a moose hunt when his group found a lynx track in fresh snow. But this was not like the lynx tracks he had seen countless times before. The stride length was much greater, suggesting a larger, longer-legged animal. The depth of the tracks indicated something considerably heavier than a typical lynx. Later that evening, back at camp, they heard vocalizations that the guide described as similar to lynx sounds he had heard before, but deeper, more powerful. Like a lynx call played at half speed. A trapper in northern Saskatchewan reported an incident from the winter of 2015. He was running his trap line when he found one of his sets had caught a lynx. Except this lynx was unlike any he had seen in 25 years of trapping. He estimated its weight at close to 50 pounds, nearly double what he would expect. Its body was noticeably longer and more heavily muscled than typical lynx. The pelts, when stretched and dried, measured significantly larger than his previous lynx pelts. He sold it to a fur buyer who also remarked on its unusual size, but once it entered the commercial fur trade, it became impossible to track. Accounts come from Indigenous communities. In several First Nations oral traditions from northern Canada, storytellers describe two types of lynx. One is the common lynx, matching the description that science recognizes. The other is described as the great lynx, sometimes called the ghost lynx. These cats are said to be much larger, more aggressive, and less dependent on snowshoe hares. Some stories describe them taking down young caribou, or even defending kills from wolves. Western science might dismiss these accounts as mythology, yet Indigenous knowledge has proven accurate about wildlife many times. The existence of the Kermode bear, the white spirit bear of British Columbia, was known to local communities long before Western science confirmed it as a real color morph. So what could actually explain these reports? First, there is simple misidentification. In deep snow, in low light, in dense forest, it is entirely possible for people to misjudge the size of a lynx. Without a clear reference point, a normal-sized lynx can appear much larger. A thick winter coat also adds bulk to their appearance. This almost certainly accounts for some reports, perhaps even many of them. But it does not explain everything, especially accounts from experienced trappers and biologists who have extensive familiarity with lynx. Another possibility is individual variation. Within any species, there is a range of sizes. Most Canada lynx fall within the 18 to 24 pound range, but what about the outliers? In any population, there will be individuals at the extreme end of the bell curve. A particularly large male lynx, in excellent condition with abundant prey, might reach 35 or even 40 pounds. Add in thick winter fur, and a 35-pound lynx could look absolutely massive. But there is another intriguing possibility. What if there is an unrecognized subspecies or population of Canada lynx that grows larger than the documented norm? It sounds far-fetched, but history is full of examples of distinct populations within a species that show significant size differences. Look at the Kodiak bear, the same species as other brown bears, yet much larger because of abundant salmon and genetic isolation. Canada lynx already inhabit a huge range. Is it really impossible that some isolated populations in the most remote regions might have evolved to be significantly larger? Perhaps in areas where prey is more diverse, natural selection might favor larger individuals that can take bigger prey. The challenges to this theory are significant. Modern genetic studies of Canada lynx have sampled populations across their range, and while they have found some genetic differentiation between regions, nothing suggests a dramatically different subspecies. However, most studies focus on lynx from areas where they are already being studied or managed. The most remote regions, the deepest wilderness areas where few humans venture, are underrepresented in scientific sampling. There is also the possibility of abundant prey in certain areas. The classic model of lynx ecology says they eat almost exclusively snowshoe hares, and in much of their range that is true. But in some regions, lynx have access to more diverse prey. In places where multiple prey species are abundant year-round, a lynx might grow considerably larger than one that experiences the feast and famine cycle tied to hare populations. Psychology and perception also play a role here. The human brain is wired to notice threats, and our fight or flight response can make dangerous animals seem larger than they actually are. Studies have shown that people consistently overestimate the size of predators they encounter. Fear and adrenaline affect perception and memory formation. Memory is fallible and malleable. An impressive 30-pound lynx encountered years ago can become a 50-pound lynx in the retelling, not through deliberate dishonesty, but through normal memory reconstruction. But here's what we cannot ignore. The sheer number and consistency of accounts from experienced outdoors people matters. Trappers who have handled hundreds of lynx pelts insist they have encountered something different. Biologists with advanced degrees and decades of field experience report tracks or signs they cannot explain within the standard model. Indigenous elders, whose knowledge of the land spans lifetimes, maintain that there are varieties of lynx that science has not properly recognized. At some point, the accumulation of credible witness testimony has to mean something. One researcher has been collecting these accounts for years, looking for patterns. He has noticed that reports of unusually large lynx cluster in certain areas, particularly the most remote parts of northern Canada and interior Alaska. These are regions where human presence is minimal, wildlife surveys are infrequent, and vast stretches of wilderness remain largely unstudied. He has also noted that many reports come from late winter, when lynx are at their heaviest after months of feeding and their winter coats are at maximum thickness. What would it take to settle this mystery? Ideally, a specimen. A lynx that is shot, trapped, or found dead that verifiably exceeds the accepted size range by a significant margin, with photographic documentation, measurements recorded by multiple people, and genetic samples preserved for analysis. Short of that, high-quality trail camera footage showing an oversized lynx with a clear size reference would be compelling. But here's the challenge. These cats, if they exist in numbers that differ from typical lynx, are likely extraordinarily rare and incredibly elusive. They inhabit some of the most remote, inaccessible terrain on the continent. Taken together, what can we actually conclude? The evidence suggests that most reports of unusually large lynx can probably be explained by a combination of factors. Normal size variation at the upper end of the range, perceptual errors due to conditions and brief sightings, the impressive appearance created by thick winter fur, psychological factors that make predators seem larger than they are, and the natural human tendency towards storytelling and exaggeration over time. These factors, working together, likely account for the majority of reports, but probably not all of them. There remains a small percentage of accounts, particularly from highly experienced observers, that are harder to explain away. The reality is that the boreal forest is vast, and much of it remains understudied. Camera trap studies, genetic surveys, and wildlife management efforts tend to focus on accessible areas. The deepest wilderness, the areas days or weeks from the nearest road, remain largely mysterious. In those wild spaces, it is not impossible that lynx populations exist that differ in some ways from what we have documented elsewhere. The mystery of North America's lynx is not going to be solved by speculation or storytelling. It will require more research, more systematic surveys of remote populations, more genetic analysis, and more careful documentation of unusual specimens and sightings. It will also require open-mindedness combined with scientific rigor, a willingness to consider that what we think we know might not be the complete picture. Until then, the stories will continue. Trappers will keep finding the occasional pelt that seems too large. Hunters will spot tracks that do not match their experience. And somewhere in the vast boreal wilderness, lynx will continue to live their secretive lives, some fitting perfectly into what science expects, and perhaps, just perhaps, some pushing the boundaries of what we think we know. Have you encountered a lynx that seemed unusually large or different from what you would expect? The accounts keep coming in, and each one adds another piece to this ongoing puzzle.